Hello everybody, it's Kentario. I'm back again with Christ and comic books. Today is going to be a start to something new, something that I'm rather highly interested in getting across, highly interested in pointing out. So before we actually get into the content of what we're going to be talking about, I want to kind of point out where I'm coming from with this. This might take me just short of 5 minutes. So one of the important things that I've learned as a Christian, as someone who reads the Bible, as one who truly believes in observing the Bible, studying the Bible, learning from it, it's important that we learn about other religions and cultures as well. I'm not saying that to say that they should be justified in the way that they carry themselves, but in us getting an understanding, then we can effectively be able to speak to the impact and the power of Christ in the midst of what they already believe. Here's where I'm coming from with this thought process is from having started in Genesis, and when I'm saying starting in Genesis, I'm reading from cover to cover, so I'm currently in Leviticus. So in reading that, when looking in Genesis, one of the things I strongly believe is that things did not begin to diversify, and that what I mean by that is in the sense of idol worship and other gods, until either from the point of after Noah's Ark, when his son was cursed, and their family, of course, there was a separation there between him and his family. So, of course, the word and the teachings of God flowed from them into what they would be teaching those other generations, or from the point in which, from that point, either leading up to or during the time of the Tower of Babel, because within that time, that's where, again, we get a separation taking place here at a point where God has made himself to be the primary focus for the people, the primary aim for the people, regardless of the approach that they go to take. Because at the Tower of Babel, they're building the tower to reach God, but that's not the way in which God ordained for them to be able to reach him, because they were operating off of their own imagination, which also can lead to there being that perverse interpretation of God himself, which is where you get different types of religions and other belief systems. So with that being the case, of course, when he split the language, that's where you see the people get split. And then later on, as you get into Abraham, and Abraham leaving his father's house to go and have his own, then all of a sudden we're introduced to the Egyptian kingdom and their ways, and other countries such as Sodom and Gomorrah and their ways, and the place in which Melchizedek was, how that was appropriate, but the neighboring Sodom and Gomorrah was not appropriate. So you see that diversity between the religions and the belief systems that were present during those times in Genesis. They begin diversifying at that point. But it's very important for us as Christians to understand these other cultures and beliefs so that we can effectively speak to them. Because honestly, and this is my belief on this, they all come from having a belief and a relationship with God. It is, however, whether or not what they are doing is truly them capturing who God is. So the aim of these series that I'll be doing is to bring that relationship a bit more closer. It's not to say, okay, well, they're justified in what they believe. No, this is to bring about how this is actually them just stemming from this. And in no way am I attempting to necessarily disrespect an individual's beliefs, but I am looking to break down the mythology to bring it back into this relationship with Christ and what has led to our society, of what we believe in, things of that nature. So the focus on today's video, looks like I did that in less than 5. Proud of me for once. But focus of this video is looking at doing this on Thor and Loki cross Jacob and Esau. Now, some of you might be wondering, it's like, where's the relationship there? To make it simple, you have the brother, you have Thor. Thor is being the big, strong, mythological hero who is a great warrior who goes and fights against giants and other touch beings. So he's a great warrior. He's strong and able to fight. You see, of course, he's illustrated in some illustrations with the long golden hair. Other illustrations, you see him with the long hair, but you also see him fully facial beard. One of the aspects to that is you see that similar to Esau being the one who was born from Isaac as a hunter, a very big person. And then when we simplify that between Loki and Jacob, Loki, trickster, Jacob, and other interpretations also means trickster. A trickster. So you see that there's a correlation in name with those two characters, and the correlation between strength and what they produced as a person, because Esau is a hunter-gatherer. You see that correlation with Esau and Thor. So I want to start this off by looking at Thor and Loki. Now, if you're talking mythologically, okay, because again, the real focus is comics in Christ, comics in the Bible, but I do not want to forsake the actual mythological aspects. I'm going to be speaking on actually three people, not necessarily two. So we have Thor, we have Loki, and then we have Odin. So with Odin is, considered to be the All-Father. He's considered to be like that God figure, at least from a biblical sense, who then had Thor, who was his son, of course, and then, of course, Loki being a separate party. When we're talking, of course, to the mythological alignment, you can, of course, have Odin, someone who is seeking wisdom. You have Thor, who is that great warrior, who's the son of him, who is also from other countries, is seen as like a Christ-like figure, that person that fights for the people. So that's where his role comes in this. Now, you may wonder, where does Loki come in all this? Because Loki, in the mythological sense, is not identified as a sibling to Thor. He's actually, if anything, considered a sibling to Odin. So there's that difference there when we're talking mythological view versus the comic illustration, because in the comics, Thor is the brother to Loki. So there's a difference there. The thing about these three characters is they're the most popular when we're talking in the mythos of the Norse of the Norse belief. So when you are looking at the focus on Odin, Odin is one that I believe would correlate to that of Isaac. One simplified way of looking at that is Odin had lost one of his eyes, and in the process of losing that one eye, he sacrificed having that one eye so that he could instead gain wisdom. He was seeking out wisdom. He went on a journey of his own, ended up meeting someone who was considered to be his uncle, who had a well of knowledge to drink from, but he would not allow Odin to drink from it unless he gave up one of his eyes, which he did. So there's a vision impairment there, but an ever flowing wisdom that dwells within Odin. And we can see that similarity there with Isaac, because Isaac needed to have wisdom to be able to take from Abraham all of that which Abraham had to carry on the covenant that was bestowed upon Abraham, which is to make them a people of many nations. That's a great burden to bear. So you need to have wisdom to know how I can make this happen, how I can maintain this thing. But upon having the two sons that Isaac ended up having, and of course, getting older, his vision became impaired as well. And he had to be able to select who was going to take on the mantle here, to carry on the family name, so to speak. And the one that he favored was Esau. So then we shift again back to Thor. I simplified him. But he is observed as one that was a warrior, a great warrior in that, fighting for the people, going against the giants, which are, if you want to look at that, a great spiritual threat in one sense, a great natural threat in another. They were taking on, these giants and being able to destroy them using his hammer. He rode in on a chariot that had his two rams that would lead in that chariot, and those rams are what Thor could feed upon to regenerate. If he was ever injured in any way, he could feed on them, and as long as those rams' bones were present, then they could come back themselves. So he's very well known as being a warrior, and being very strong and fighting for the people. So then we get into looking at Loki. When you start to look at Loki, again, he's a trickster. He's very mischievous. Even more so, he was looking to, there was someone he was looking to hurt. I forget the origin of this specifically. I highly recommend you look into that. But basically, he learned that the mistletoe was the one weakness to another one of the deities, and he used that against that deity to hurt him. So that's something that's very important about Loki. Another thing about Loki is he had more than one partner in his life. He's had children from more than one woman. As far as the God aspect goes, he's had more than one woman in his life, of course, and then having more children. So he has several children. So that's something very significant to keep in mind in that. So I think that is very important to point out. We got Odin, we have Thor, and then we have Loki. Now, when you're talking comic book, that is where we really get to see how much they tie into the biblical aspect, and as far as the relationship goes, because the comic book Thor and Loki, we see them as siblings. and it's considered partial siblings due to Loki's actually coming from the race of the frost giants, but he looked so normal, so that's where he was able to quote unquote blend in while living amongst Odin and his family and the people of Asgard. So what had happened was Odin was at war against the king of the frost giants, and in the midst of them having warfare and battling and things, after a great battle had taken place, he found Loki. But in finding Loki, he still recognized Loki as a prince, being that he came from a king, which is why he took him in and brought him up. Now, one of the things he made sure that he advanced in wasn't necessarily in physical abilities and physical strength, but he advanced himself in being able to operate through magic, conjuring up potions, shape-shifting, causing illusions, even being able to go through realm for realm at able to traverse different realms without the assistance of anybody else to be able to do that. So that's something that's also very important to keep in mind and to think about. And the reason I say that is because I want to actually bring that up later, why Loki being able to traverse realms is very important. So then, of course, comic book Thor being accepting of the brother, however, has issues with the brother because his brother can't help but continue to do evil things. So he, being the hero as we know him in the Marvel Universe, he's being cast out for not being demonstrating the proper worthy mindset, which of course leads to him being able to use a hammer as he matures and develops his actual character to make him worthy to be able to use Mjolnir, and be able to more so harness the power that's within himself, more so than actually part of the hammer, as we primarily see illustrated in the MCU versus being illustrated in the comics. But we see that growth there. And similar from the mythological Odin, with the comic book Odin, there is of course the sacrificing of the eye to be able to harness wisdom. So that's that aspect there. Now, when we shift over to the biblical sense, I know it was kind of scattered talking about the mythological and comic book version of Thor, Odin, and Loki, but hopefully to be a bit more clear here with the biblical sense, biblical illustration, because there's, like I said, there's so much to the mythology, but it's kind of clean cut when you're talking the biblical one because it's a clear, straight story. But to summarize it, Isaac being the son of Abraham, Isaac had two sons. The two sons were both being born around actually about the same time, because as Esau was on his way out of the womb, you have Jacob grabbing his ankle on the way out. So you see already there's that tussle between the siblings as to who's going to be first, as to who's going to be, the chosen son of the family. One thing about the comics is Loki is always trying to take the throne of Asgard from Odin because he viewed himself more worthy than Thor. So that's something else to keep in mind when we're talking the comics. But as we go here, so Esau was brought up as a hunter-gatherer. He was very physically strong. His skin was covered in his red hair. So that's something to keep in mind when we're identifying the physical capabilities of Esau. However, we don't see those illustrated so strongly when we're talking about Jacob, because Jacob was brought up in the house with his mother, learning the things around the home, learning how to manage the property, learning how to manage the finances. He was learning all of these things about how to take care of the in-house things from his mom, who she was more so inside with Jacob, while Isaac was more so inside with Esau, which you kind of see again. That's that Thor and Odin relationship versus him being able to look at Jacob and see something great about him. So going forward with that, those two brothers actually ended up having a fallout because Esau, coming home from a hunt, was starving, hungry, and while his brother had just made some porridge, he told him, "Give me your birthright, or if you give me your birthright, then I'll give you this bowl of porridge." But Esau's like, "Please, just feed me. I'm your brother," basically is where he's coming from. "Give me your birthright and I will." So he tricks him. This is the main trickery thing that we see with Jacob. He deceives his brother into giving up his birthright, being that firstborn son, getting the blessing from father, and he gives his brother the food to eat. So in the midst of his hunger, he demonstrated a high level of weakness. So here's the correlation there between what just happened with Jacob and Esau and what happens with Thor and Loki. Thor is very vulnerable to magic. He's vulnerable to illusions. So he is very susceptible to those things, regardless of his high physical strength. and his experiences in warfare. He's very vulnerable to those things. Esau demonstrated a vulnerability to being able to be deceived, being that he was willing to give up his birthright to be able to have just a simple bowl of food. So we see that vulnerability there with Esau. So then it leads to Jacob going to the extent of deceiving his father to be able to get the blessing so that he can become the chosen one. Now, this outrages the brother Esau, because so now Esau is looking to kill Jacob. So instead of Jacob sticking around to be killed, Jacob leaves his country and travels to go to another land to be able to survive, basically. And then getting to a new land, you actually see the roles get reversed. He goes into servitude for a man for 7 years to earn the hand of his daughter, who he fell in love with. I believe it was Rachel, and to win her hand in marriage. So he was in servitude to the father. But the father deceived him and said, well, after the 7 years of service, you actually need to marry my daughter Leah first, because she's the firstborn of my daughters. So now he has to marry this daughter first. He does 7 more years of service to the father to now win the right to marry this other daughter. So again, this is another Loki relationship with Jacob, because he has more than one woman. And as we'll later see, Jacob has 12 sons, actually a total of 13 sons between these two women, having been birthed. Of course, now here's the trick here that was also very important having read the Bible. It wasn't just Leah and Rachel. It's also both these women's 2 handmaidens involved, so a total of 4 women. Just like I said, Loki had more than one partner. Jacob, he had more than one partner. So there's that correlation there. So all throughout this time, Esau is doing everything of his own to have his own, whereas we see there's a big growth that's taking place with with Jacob, and Jacob traversing through different lands and different territories to have his own. So again, that correlates to, because Esau, from where it kind of is pointing out, he didn't necessarily completely leave home. He may go maybe one country over or two, but he never traversed the lands to get to he never truly traversed the lands to have what he had. Jacob, however, did. Jacob, even although he went to this one land and got married and things, he later ends up moving to Egypt, of course, due to the actions of his children. But he's able to traverse lands and still be successful, where we don't see that much as a play out for Esau. Same thing with Thor. Even now with the comics, Thor is just now becoming a very big hit. Not just going to Earth and being a hero, but he's being a hero on Earth, and now he's traveling through space. So they're just now expanding the realms in which Thor has even traversed. So we kind of see that correlation between the two when we're talking Jacob and Esau, and when we're talking Thor and Loki. Even more so when we're talking Isaac as well as Odin. I want to hear what you guys think about these relationships, and I'm hoping to do a lot more correlations between other religions, between those and the biblical stories. Next time, I'm looking to be talking about Buddha, and we're going to be talking about the minister Paul. I believe those two are also ones that are very much related in the way that their stories went. There are 2 major things that I identify with for them, but I want to do a bit more research before I bring this to the table. Thank you guys for watching, and y'all have yourselves a blessed day. Thanks.